Tonight we're lucky to have Charles Curley join us. Charles Curley has read every bill that went before the legislature last session and quite a few in other sessions, older sessions. So he can navigate his way through. His finding in the Liberty Index, which is includes all the bills, is on the Republic Free Choice website.
And it has its own website as well.
And has its own website. So you do a search for Wyoming Liberty Group, or Wyoming Liberty Index.
WyomingLibertyIndex.info. That's where you'll find us.
And you can find it. Meanwhile, he has, in the spring, he published this paper on the key liberty votes, where he selected 5 or 6 votes for the House and Senate and gave legislators ratings on those. So you can find out how your legislator is, in a snapshot, how your legislator is thinking about liberty. Pretty much, according to our assessment. And Charles also has volunteers work with him to rate the bills. So keep that in mind, speak to him afterward. If you'd like to begin to read some bills and give your assessment of how liberty-friendly it is, we'd love to have you join us with that. And before we continue with Charles, I'd like to bring up an event that's happening a week from today at about 10 o'clock in the Hathaway building. The State Board of Education has been finally, at least, they've allowed a half an hour for people who want to discuss the standards in Common Core curriculum. And Amy Edmonds is going to be the only one that's going to be allowed to speak. One person, one subject, and we're going to give it give it all its worth. If you can make that meeting, that would be very important. They need to know that there's a citizen presence. So that's next Tuesday, the 8th of October, by 10 o'clock. We're supposed to go from 10:15 to 10:45, and we'd like to make them move to another meeting room because they didn't have capacity. But so show up if you can. And Charles, why don't you? I mean, you've done this reading. I think we had somebody come today, didn't know how to talk to her legislator, how to get introduced to her legislator, that kind of thing. So. Okay. Now you have something to talk about when you do have lunch with your legislator or coffee or whatever. You have the key liberty votes, and you can also check out the Wyoming Liberty Index and just have a discussion of the kinds of issues. You can get a copy of this back here on the table along with some other papers, and also the Common Core curriculum paper. So thank you for volunteering to be informed and attending our meeting, and I hope you enjoy it. Oh, by the way, I'm Susan Gore. I forgot my badge.
And I'm Charles Curley, yep. Okay, my name is Charles Curley, and the Wyoming Liberty Index started 11 years ago. It actually predates the Wyoming Liberty Group. A group of libertarians all around the country were saying to themselves, gee, if we all move to one state, then we can have a lot more influence on that state than if we stayed separate in the 50 states and elsewhere. So they started comparing states and looking at them. The Wyoming Liberty Index came out of that effort. It was an effort to look at Wyoming as a possible place to settle, and one of the questions, of course, is how liberty-friendly is the state? Well, gee, no state income tax, that's real attractive, and a few other features that some of us take for granted, I think. So the guy by the name of Paul Bono and some other volunteers started looking at bills. The first 2 years, they only looked at the House of Representatives. After that, they started looking at the Senate. They have tried to make an effort to look at every single bill that is introduced. And this year we had 429. This year, 2013, was a general session. You get a lot more bills. It's both longer and easier to bring in a bill. So that's what the Wyoming Liberty Index is about. Let me explain a little bit about how the legislature works. The state of Wyoming runs on a biennial budget. Elections are every 2 years, etc. And the legislature also runs on a biennium. So 1 year is a general session, and it's supposed to deal with anything except the budget. The other session is the budget session. So we've just had a general session, and that's what I'll be talking about tonight. The budget session will be coming up in February. And the reason I say supposed to is that more and more we're seeing the supplemental budget get larger and larger. So we're slowly drifting in the direction of actually having an annual budget. They won't call it that, they will deny it, but the reality is the supplemental budget's getting larger and larger every year, and I think that's a very bad trend. I think we should be budgeting more than just 2 years out. I think we should be looking much further than that, but that's a whole other story. So what we do in the index, so we've got it set up so that you can do this in the comfort of your own home. All you need is a decent internet connection and a decent web browser. And we ask you to look at the bills, say, is this pro-liberty, anti-liberty, up or down? And then write a short comment about why you came to that conclusion. So, you know, a couple of sentences, a paragraph. And that's all it takes. Do that for, you know, I've done it for every single bill, so 429 this year. We don't require that volunteers do it for every single bill. Some volunteers may have an expertise in a particular area. They'll look at those bills. Other volunteers look at other areas. This year, I looked at the bills, of course, and we only had one other volunteer, but that was Paul Bono. So he's very familiar with it, and he was kind of glad to get back at it after a hiatus. So what we do then is we take the ratings attached to the bills and run them through some custom software, and we produce a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet has information on each legislator, including their votes. We look at third reading votes where they exist, and we look at sponsorship. And we multiply that times the rating and add all those up, and we get a rating, if you will, for the legislators. And I have to say, one of the problems we run into, a small problem, but we try not to look at the sponsorship on the bill. I don't want to look at a bill and say, oh, that was sponsored by so-and-so. This must be a terrible bill. On to the next one. Don't want to do that. We can get good bills out of some legislators that I'm not real happy with, and vice versa. So let's try to stay away from personal prejudice and just look at the bill. Now, you're probably familiar with organizations like NRA, Gun Owners of America, and other organizations look at bills on their single issue. GOA does some excellent work in Congress, but they only look at gun-related bills. We look at every bill we can because every bill has the potential to affect liberty. And it may be the nature of the bill, or it may be a side effect of something that they're doing in the bill. So that's the basic concept of what we're trying to do. As far as I know, we are the only rating that looks at every single bill out of a legislature. And in that sense, it's a real good thing that we're dealing with Wyoming with 400, 500 bills typically in a session, because states like California, where they go year-round, they can get into tens of thousands of bills. Be glad you don't live in California. That's another reason to be glad you don't live in California. So, a couple of things in general. It was interesting, pro-liberty bills went about 50-50, but we got about half of them passed, the other half failed. Oh well. But anti-liberty bills were routed, almost 2-to-1 failed. And I think that's a very interesting and a very positive outcome. As Calvin Coolidge said, it's more important to defeat bad bills than it is to pass good bills. And, you know, an obvious example is, boy, I wish we'd defeated Obamacare. So, in spite of some of the really bad bills that did get passed, I'm pretty much satisfied with the outcome from this session. Obviously, the worst bills are probably the best known bills, SF 104, which is the Superintendent of Education bill. The fuel tax increase, those were successful. Unfortunately, we had some good bills that unfortunately failed, and I think prime among those I would consider 3 firearms-related bills. One of those, okay, we look at third reading votes and sponsorships. The Key Liberty votes looks at other votes, not necessarily third reading. It may look at a vote on an amendment. It may look at a vote on introduction. But in the life of a bill, there are other things besides votes. And one of the more egregious examples of this is what happened to, I think it's HB 105, the carry on campus bill. Came out of the House, I think 56-1. Should have been fairly well received in the Senate. Went to the Senate Education Committee. They held a hearing on it. The room was packed. People who spoke in favor of it, except a lot of college campus people, administrators and so on, spoke very much against it. Okay, this is a prime example of something that can go wrong in the life of a bill. Normally, after you've had the hearing in committee, you vote on whether to bring the bill out, yay or nay, and you can vote it out with a recommendation. Do pass, amend and pass, or do not pass, and that's a recommendation to the whole body. The Senate Education Committee could not even muster someone to move to bring it out with a do not pass recommendation. And what I find particularly egregious about that example is this is the Senate Education Committee. This is the committee, one of the 2 committees, that wants teacher accountability. They want teachers to be tested so that they can be accountable. There are proposals to peg teachers' pay to how well their students do on tests. This is how much accountability they want. But they will not be accountable for a vote on a bill in committee. That's pretty bad. Okay. On to probably our most important thing that comes out of this is, of course, how we rate the legislators. Ever since the Wyoming Liberty Index got started in 2003, our best senator has been Cale Case. And once again, no surprise, he comes in at the head of the class. Did very well, and did so by a large margin. In the House, it has always jumped around, different people every year. Well, this year we have a repeat. Last year's best, most liberty-friendly legislator was Kendall Croker. He won again this year. So I'm very pleased to see that, and we may have an interesting change in the House with Kendall taking that position. So I'm very encouraged. So my compliments to both of them, and to Kendall particularly, because this is new to him. Last year, we started an experiment. I've always conjectured that a legislator who never voted for a bill, wouldn't vote for any bill, even if it was a bill to abolish the income tax, wouldn't vote for it, and never sponsored any bills, would actually do fairly well. So I invented one. In the process of, I added this to the software, and you can see it on the spreadsheet. We have a hypothetical legislator called Dr. No. And the name, of course, is taken from the James Bond movie, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that Ron Paul is called Dr. No. Nothing to do with that. So Dr. No did very well last year in both houses. And this year I was very pleased to find, actually, that a third of the House came in ahead of Dr. No. So that's an interesting datum. We've only been at this with Dr. No for 2 years now, so I wouldn't draw any firm conclusions from it, but I thought that was interesting.
Charles, is it true that Dr. No votes no on every single bill?
Correct. My hypothetical Dr. No, yes.
Yes, okay.
But then you would also be voting no on liberty-friendly bills.
Correct.
So that's why he's not at the top.
That's why he's not at the top, but it's interesting that even with that strategy, not seeking out pro-liberty votes to vote aye on, he still does fairly well. So our most liberty-hostile legislators in the House, Mary Throne, Democrat from Laramie, and
Cheyenne.
I'm sorry? Cheyenne? Laramie County, thank you. Laramie County. And Michael Von Flattern from Campbell County in the Senate. So, and I've got on the website, you'll see I've got a more extensive list, the bottom 10, the bottom 12 in the House, the bottom 6 in the Senate, the top 12 in the House, the top 6 in the Senate. So that is there. All of this is available to you. There's a spreadsheet with the names, the votes, the bills, the comments on the bills, you know, why a rater rated a bill a particular way is also in the spreadsheet. You need to hover your mouse pointer over the comment and it'll pop up for you as you look at it on your spreadsheet software. So that is pretty much what I have. We've talked a little bit about the Wyoming Liberty Index, which the Key Liberty Votes, which I also do. The Key Liberty Votes is a slightly different animal. It's 6 votes in each house, not necessarily third reading. We don't get into sponsorship. This year, for example, I looked at an amendment to the supplemental budget bill as one of the votes. And so it's a somewhat different animal, but it's a very quick snapshot. I think this goes into more depth, but because it's restricted to third reading votes, it's not complete. Neither one of them is complete. You know, we'd have to be there listening, standing behind the columns and listening to the conversation in the hallway to be complete, unfortunately. So that's all I have. At this point, I'd be glad to take questions.
I did think of 2 things that I would say here, and the first one is not specific to this index. Although I want to say first thanks to Charles for coordinating this, because this is an awesome project and it is an enormous amount of work. Just the time from the end of the session, which was the last week of February, till now, you've probably been reading the whole way, I would imagine. Actually,
I start reading in early December when they start showing up on the LSO website the LSO puts them up on the website when the LSO is happy with them and when the sponsor has signed off on them. Okay? So the sooner you guys sign off on them, the sooner we can read them.
But where would Dr. No be then? Anyway, I want to thanks to Charles, and if people do want to help him with this, it is really a fabulous project. I do have 2 things. One that just kind of came up with your comment about the NRA and groups like that only look at certain bills. And I'm just going to share a kind of an experience that I had. This is my first session in the legislature. And of course, you know, the NRA A rating is a coveted stamp on you, and I am a life member of the NRA, and I got a B+. And I was just really affronted to think that the NRA could rate me as a B+. And I look back on the survey. You know, you have all these surveys, and if you have taken surveys or remember tests from high school or whatever, you know that you can generally tell what the right answer is. And there were 2 bills, or 2 hypothetical situations that they gave you where you know, they're really looking at gun things, and I was looking at things from a more of a panorama of liberty. For example, and you may not agree with me on this, but just I'm telling you this so that you can see that it's really advisable to look into things when you want to evaluate someone on this. And their idea was, would you pass a bill telling police chiefs and sheriffs in your state that they must take any firearms that they have received from crimes and stuff, and that they must sell them in public to get the money. This is the NRA's idea of the best practice of what to do to get the firearms back out where people could have them. So I thought, well, I would like to know what the sheriff or the police officer does here. So I called them up, and they said, well, the first thing we do is try to return them to the owner. The second thing we try to do is sell them and get money. The third thing that we do is put them into the armory, if it's something we can use. And then fourth, occasionally they're really nasty and gunked up, and then we do destroy them. And I thought to myself, why should I, from the Capitol building, reach out into every law enforcement agency in the state of Wyoming and say, you must do this? So to me, it was an issue of what they called subsidiarity, where let the decision be made to the lower level possible. Now, again, you may not agree with what I'm thinking, but that is why I was thinking something like that. And then there was a similar type one later. And so I just want to share that with you to see how single issue groups often will come up with something different than a group like the Liberty Group, which is really trying to look in a broad-based thing. So that's one thought. The other thing I want to share, and I will tell you, I skimmed over my thing, and I did beat Dr. No, but I'm only number 20. And I just want to also point out that, and you know, you talked about coming here with the Liberty State, Free State Project. And it's good to think philosophically for each of you, look, what issues are you interested in? Because there is a difference. I am nearly always a conservative, but I am not always a libertarian. And those two things are not the same, okay? And for the example that I pulled out, and again, this is, you know, everybody is certainly entitled to draw conclusions and to vote the way that they want to, but it's, you want to take into consideration what issues are being considered. This is a bill that actually didn't make it to the floor, House Bill 169, on the definition of marriage. And the goal of the bill was to change the definition of marriage in Wyoming to between two natural persons instead of between a man and a woman. Now, the libertarian scoring this said, good bill. It gets a 1, why limit to only 2, leave people free to contract as they see fit. And that's a libertarian assessment. I mean, that's a very valid libertarian way to look at that bill. But on that kind of issue, I myself am not a libertarian. I'm a conservative, and I want to conserve many things from a traditional society, and so I would not have voted for that bill if it came to the floor. Again, because it was that would have been a conservative vote for me, not a libertarian vote. So, again, awesome job that Charles and the people do, and this whole and the group. And you see, I'm here, and this isn't the first time I've come either. I'd like to point out. But
and we're glad to have you here.
It's really important that all of us, as citizens, as voters, that you really take the time to assess your representatives, the bills, the issues. And personally, I think it's not a good idea to just say, oh, so-and-so says yes or no or 6 or 92 or whatever it is, without knowing what goes into that, because we all of us have different ideas about what our values are and where we want things to weigh more or weigh less. And so it's important as an involved citizen to really take that into consideration.
I'd like to ask her one more question, or maybe I'd just like to ask both Amy has served 3 terms and Sue 1 now. How would you like to best interact with your constituents, and what is your experience of how active your constituents are?
My past experience was the best way to interact is face-to-face or over the phone. I've received emails. It's always harder when it's an email because you can't really get their feelings. Sometimes you can really get their feelings, but it's not always a good discourse. So person or over the phone is the best way for me, or was for me.
And that's why it's really important to get to know your legislator, because I personally am not a telephone person. Email works best. You know, I still have, my youngest is still here in school, active life, you know, the commissary is closed now, what with the federal government deal, but the grocery store, the laundry, you know, all that sort of thing. So for me, to communicate with me, emails are good. And I check my email nearly every day. So if people communicate with me that way, I will usually, you know, you'll get an answer back. And I'll just, again, can't shut up a politician. I'll just throw this out. You know, if you give me your address so that I know you're in my district, you'll get an answer a lot faster. Because we do get lots and lots, hundreds of emails from who knows where. I mean, during the session, I had a letter from a lady in Michigan. I mean, I don't really know why she was writing to me. But so if you put your address, the person will know that this person may or may not vote for me. So then you'll get a little bit better response. So as email is better for me. You know, some people, depending on, like, if you're in Representative Eklund's district, he gave on the Tribune Eagle interview an example of government waste was the government giving him a computer. And we kind of teased him about it during the session of, how's your lap warmer working out there for you, John? So, you know, it really pays to get to know your representative, because we are all just individuals and respond better to people different ways. I'll just also plug in that polite is always nice. And also using your own words is more effective than sending us a Xerox copy of something that someone else produced, especially when the Xerox copy says, "Dear Assemblyman Wilson," because we don't have assemblymen in Wyoming, and so I know you got that letter from somewhere else.
Yes. Yes, same thing with emails. Don't send form emails because, okay, a little bit of backup here. During session, legislators are very, very busy. Make it short and sweet. And what I do is I'll put something like House Bill number, vote nay, I'm in your district, if that's, oh, but Nathan knows me. He knows that I'm in his district, so I don't have to do that for him. For Jerry Geis, yeah, I do. And then if you want to, an explanation below that. But legislators may get hundreds, 200, 300 emails a day. Most of them delete, unfortunately. And that's not intended as rudeness. It's not intended to ignore anyone. It's simply the nature of the beast. During session, they're incredibly busy. So keep it short and sweet. And don't expect an immediate response, but do watch how they vote on what your issue is. If you get a response, I think that's great. And I also have to say, Wyoming has one of the most accessible legislatures I have ever dealt with. You guys are great. Really, I do appreciate it. So, gentlemen?
Would it behoove you to do your homework before calling your elected official? Say Susan wanted to make cardboard illegal or something like that. I said, I don't like that bill. Well, have you read it? Not really. Well, why don't you like it? Well, I have no idea. Would that be a good idea, you know? Do your homework on it so you could at least have a logical idea of why you're opposed to it or for it, or...
Yes,
Okay.
an excellent idea. If you can read the bill and you can say to the legislator, and this is maybe best done on email, but on phone conversation or whatever, you might be able to say, well, I kind of like the bill, but I have a problem with this paragraph. Be able to cite it exactly so the legislator, yeah, there it is. Okay, I see what you're talking about. Again, this is courtesy to the legislators, helping conserve their time. In your example, don't expect the legislator to educate you on the issue. If the legislator says, well, here are some resources you might want to look at, I think that's great, and I think that's a courtesy that legislators can do, but I don't require it because I think you're right. It's up to the constituent to be at least knowledgeable on the issue. I've seen some emails to legislators from out of state, form letter, with obvious incorrect facts about Wyoming and an arguably incorrect fact on the subject at hand, the particular bill. And I will tell you that legislators, and I don't blame them in the least, will just ignore. So yeah, please do your homework. Oop, whoever gets the mic.
This is in connection with what Sue said. I've been a citizen lobbyist now for the past several sessions, often in the traditional kinds of issues. But I want to point out for those libertarians, and it goes along with what this gentleman said and what you said, that not only do you need to read the bill, you need to look at all of the consequences that come from that as best you can. So, as far as same-sex marriage goes, I don't care between two people. That's their business. But there are a lot of ramifications with several of their bills. The activists, as you know, wherever these same-sex issues have been settled in states, there are lawsuits. There's challenges to religious liberty, to freedom of speech, and there are any number of issues. Agencies have to close down for religious reasons. I'm thinking of adoption agencies. People have been sued because they didn't, in their conscience, they didn't want to take photographs in a marriage, and they can be sued. So that's something to consider too, the other ramifications of passing.
And look at it also from the point of view of the other side. What arguments are they going to make? Why? And I think that I think helps. I think you had a question?
Yes, sir. I was just curious where you rate these legislators, the ones you rank the lowest. Do you do anything to campaign against them?
We do not. This is officially a project of Republic Free Choice, which is a 501c4, and it can engage in politics and lobbying and that sort of thing. But at the moment, as an organization, we do not. We make this available. Constituents can read it. Next session is a budget session. I'm going to try to get that out in time for the filing period, with that obvious implication in mind. So, but it's up to people to use it, take advantage of it. And we've had this quoted in newspapers around the state. Gun Owners of America recently used it in an email during the primary. So, you know, people are aware of this. And I think it's a useful tool for constituents. And the nice thing about, by the way, the nice thing about it as a spreadsheet is if you disagree with how we rated a bill, go ahead and change it. The spreadsheet will automatically recalculate. You'll find that one bill out of 400 doesn't make that much difference, but during the budget session with fewer bills, it might. Susan.
One of the reasons that you are reading all of the bills is because there can be bills that have consequences, like Mary was saying, that are kind of, the legislator may not realize when it comes through what they're voting for. We had that situation with Healthy Frontiers, where there were 7 or 8 bills to set up sort of a socialized health care in Wyoming, and we were, because we're reading every bill, we could spot it and identify, you know, not be fooled by something slipping through the cracks, so to speak.
And we have to give credit to Regina, who spotted it and worked closely with the legislature to make very clear a pattern of bills. And that was great detective work, Regina. Thank you.
She did an amazing job. And I also, Charles, do you anticipate any particular issues that people should look for in the upcoming session?
The best way to get a handle on that right now is to look at the LSO's website, look at the committees, and they will have bills that some of the bills have been written. They're up on the website as drafts. Look at those. And some of them the committee is still discussing, so there's just a description of it in the minutes. That's the best way to get a handle. The only one I know of that has my attention, okay, a little bit of backstory. About 2 years ago, City of Riverton decided that they wanted some more funding for their rehabilitation center for detox and so on. one of the problems they have is they're funded by the city, they get money from the county, but a lot of their clients are from the reservation, which does not contribute to their funding. So they were a little bit irked about that. So they wanted to increase the tax on beer and have that pay for statewide detox centers. Well, okay, speaking as an Irishman, so last year the WAM, the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, endorsed the idea. They got Rita Campbell to agree to carry the bill. She never introduced it. It might have had something to do with the fact that I wrote a blog on it and pointed out that the tax increase they had in mind was a 700% tax increase. I don't know if I had anything to do with that or not, but anyway, Rita did not bring the bill. It came back again this year in, I think, revenue. The committee is not going to sponsor it as a committee bill, but the mover has said that he's going to sponsor it personally. So that'll be back. I will campaign against it. So let me explain something here. I talked about something called a committee bill. We do something that's very strange, at least to me, in Wyoming, and that is we'll have committees sponsor bills. So nobody's name is on it. You can't look at it as, that was sponsored by Senator Snort. I'm going to get him. Can't do that. It's, the Education Committee. Okay, we can look up who the chairman and the members of the Education Committee are, but it's a lot more diffuse. And this is a process known as virgin birth. You know, nobody's name is on it. So, and of course, you're familiar from Congress and other legislators bringing their own bills and getting them co-sponsored and so on. That's the normal process that we're all used to. So those are the two ways you can get a bill in Wyoming. I do want to, unless there are other questions, there's something else I want to bring up. We talked a little bit about civility and accountability, but this year's session is a new low in rudeness and not just from the usual suspects. Leadership telling legislators, put on your big girl pants. Leadership telling legislators, if you vote a certain way on a certain bill, this is a violation of your oath of office. That is not acceptable. And I want to toss that observation out there. We need better civility. And if leadership can't actually lead and has to try to, browbeat may be too strong a word, but has to try to push their way through with this kind of activity, maybe leadership is the wrong term. So something to think about. But those and several other incidents, it really irked me, and I wanted to say something about it.
Well, and Charles, just case in point, I think most of those statements happened at the caucus meetings. So the House caucus is the House Republicans and House Democrats caucus every Wednesday at lunchtime. So a great tactic for citizens would simply be to show up in town on a Wednesday and ask your legislator out to lunch on Wednesday, and they won't be able to go to the caucus and won't be able to listen to the leadership threaten them over whatever sundry issue. And that's a great thing. You can also talk to it as a constituent to your representative. You know, do you go to the caucuses and are they useful? And I hope you're not listening to the leadership. I hope you're listening to me as a constituent.
They should be listening to constituents first. You're right. No, both of those took place on the floor. And I'll give you more details in private if you want them.
If there aren't any more questions, maybe you could give people on this subject, and I don't want to cut people off, maybe you could say something about the upcoming State Board of Education meeting.
Okay. Before we close, I want to encourage you to work with me on the upcoming session. It's, whatever commitment of time you're comfortable with, all you need is a computer, internet connection, and the ability to do some reading, read the bills, obviously, the statute, because they may amend. And, You don't have to be even as skilled as a paralegal, just able to read plain sense. And frankly, if a bill is so dang complicated that you can't understand it, feel free to say so. So I'm looking for volunteers, always looking for volunteers. So with that, I'll close. Amy?
Yeah, so next Tuesday, a week from today, the State Board of Education will be having their meeting, and the State Board is statutorily required to set standards. So the reason that we have the Common Core standards is because the State Board actually passed them. They're giving the Wyoming Liberty Group, me, the opportunity to speak for a half hour from 10:15 to 10:45, but do come probably 15 to 20, maybe even a half hour early, because their schedule is always fluid. They could be ahead of schedule. They could be behind schedule, in which case you'll have to stay longer. We really want to get as many folks to show up as possible so that the State Board of Education can understand that this is a real issue. We've spent a lot of time, Charles, myself, others have traveled around the state, and there's a lot of parents that are heavily involved and are very concerned about this, but many of them can't get down here to Cheyenne. So we're hoping we can really get the Laramie County folks out. There's a lot of parents that will be driving. I know we're going to have quite a few, and I think hopefully they will be forced to change venues. But we'd like Laramie County to really show up in force, because it doesn't take much for you all to get out of your garages and get over to the Hathaway Building. So Hathaway Building, 9:45 to 10 o'clock, something like that, on next Tuesday. Please come.
Tell them what the heart of the issue is. I mean, progressives are really trying to take over our kids.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is the Common Core standards are a set of nationally developed standards. No one from Wyoming was involved in actually writing those standards. In the past, all the standards that our state has developed were developed by teachers and folks in this state. The standards themselves are bad. There's a lot of discussion about the standards. One of the reasons that we're told that having sort of a uniform national set of standards is important is because number of reasons. First of all, because children move around. Less than 1% of all public school children in this country move. A large percentage of those are military children. And while we all have, I have a heart for that, obviously. Their parents are choosing to serve. That's terrible. But that's the exception. That's not the rule. And we shouldn't make law based on less than 1% of students in the public education system overall. So that's one of the reasons. Also, No Child Left Behind required states to set standards, and states were then basically tested on those standards and labeled a good or bad state. States set bad standards, and so this is a way to sort of force states to set better standards. It's not a good reason for states to want to take away local control away from their communities, and really what's important to parents and to teachers and to students is to have that control at the local level, and the Common Core standard takes that away from them.
And for this, we're going to have a written speech. Amy's got it pretty much finished. It's going to go out to the press. It's going to go out to the legislators. And we'd also like you to participate in terms of speaking. We'd like to do a video of people giving their opinion for 30 seconds or a minute about how this issue is affecting them. They're after the hearts and minds of our children, and we're losing the value of our tradition of freedom. So we will have Chad will be there. Bruce will be encouraging people to speak. We'll have some questions a couple of questions for people to respond to and give brief statements. We'll make a collage and send that to legislators, the Board of Education, the press, the public, so that people really, what's happened is that people's voice has not been heard on these issues. They've been excluded, and it's been put over on us. So the Board of Education said they took a public comment, but they didn't really. And so half an hour for a very key issue is a very little bit of their two-day agenda. So we want to be sure that we make as much out of it as we can. So thank you very much for coming tonight. There are some, oh yeah, go ahead.
We're not allowed to speak at the meeting, are we? We're just...
Oh, no. You can't.
But that's how that guy in Florida get arrested over this. North Carolina or wherever it was back.
No, they won't let you. They don't want to. They're turning a deaf ear, and that's why we need to turn up the volume and talk to everybody. And the public opinion has to overwhelm the statist initiative, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that I will say in my
Here you go, here you go.
We are going to officially, Chairman Ron Michael actually was the one who allowed me to come, and we want to be very respectful of him because he put himself on the line to give me this half hour. But one of the first things I am going to ask the State Board is to allow the folks to ask questions at some point in their day. And I know that their agenda is full, but I've been to many State Board meetings and they're empty. This will be very different for them, and I hope that they respect that folks drove from a lot of different places in the state, and hopefully they'll respect that. I can't guarantee that, but we'll ask for that.
And if you want us to suggest questions, we'd be glad to suggest something you might ask, or ask your own. So thank you very much for coming. Yeah. Here.
Just before we leave, how many people know about the truckers' strike that's going on in the country on the 11th through the 13th? Okay, I see some faces like, what the heck is going on? On the 11th, a group, and I'm not sure how big it is. It's on the internet now. You can go to 1 Million Truckers March on DC, and it'll bring it up. Google that and find out what these guys are going to do. They're going to close down the United States if they can. They're not going to deliver anything, or as many trucks are not going to deliver anything. So what we're going to do too here in Cheyenne is we're going to get a tea party started, and it's going to be on the 12th, right in the middle of this thing, on the grounds at the Capitol from 1 to 3. Taylor Haynes, maybe you folks, if you want to put in 2 cents worth and things like that, be at the tea party from 1 to 3 on the 12th. But closing down the United States is the same thing they're doing today. They're trying to close down the government and things like that. You can do that and say the government's closed, and it's not really closed. If the truckers do this on a weekend, we're closed. What I'm telling you tonight would be to stock up on a few things that you might need for the next 30 days, because if they don't drive for 3 days, things are going to come off the shelves like crazy. It's going to be like a big storm coming through. So the 12th from 1 to 2, Tea Party rally on the Capitol lawn. Please be there with us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Have some refreshments and have a talk. Thank you so much, Charlie.